Okay, for our next set of global intersection pieces, we're going to be talking about Native Americans. And as we know, there are many tribes throughout the United States, as you could see on the map on the top. Those are about where the tribal locations were prior to European contact. And the bottom map is what it looks like today. So they often spoke different languages, had their own cultural, social, and political goals. They're very much a community of communities with no collective name for each themselves, as they were of many different tribes and nations. And that's going to change as there is going to be the expansion of westward expansion is going to bring lots of conflict. It brought settlers and government forces into conflict with the indigenous populations of North America, who resisted efforts to push them from their ancestral lands and hunting grounds. One of the worst atrocities done to the Native Americans was the Indian Removal Act of 1830, where the United States government determined to move all Native Americans west of the Mississippi River onto quote-unquote Indian territory. Later, as settlers continued west, they kept pushing indigenous people onto reservations. The United States government embarked in the later 19th century on a policy to reduce Native autonomy, and even further through laws and reforms aimed at forcing assimilating tribes to the white way of life. Frightened and threatened, the government outlawed traditional tribal dances, dress, language, and even took Native children and placed them in white boarding schools. For their current identity, colonial and modern mistreatment of Native Americans still exist, and their current identity is shaped by the persecution, the genocide that occurred where 90% of the population was killed through disease and warfare. And currently there is a lot of marginalization that happens for this community. They face extreme hardships. Unemployment rates on reservations are typically upwards of 50%. Some are as high as 70%. And Native Americans today maintain their cultural identity and uphold modern versions of ancient traditions, in addition to creating new art forms as part of a globalized and contemporary world. One of our pieces in the next unit, chapter 31, called Trade, will go delve deep into that. In regards to post-conflict art, keep in mind that within the history of art, many objects are ritualistic and meant to wear, carry, or use during special ceremonies and in front of large audiences. Centuries of interactions with colonial and migrant peoples means that some of the imported materials, including glass beads, machine-made cloths, and ribbons, are now considered traditional. And what is traditional is constantly changing. There is no singular, timeless, authentic Native American art or practice anymore. There are shared, larger ideas of harmony with nature, oneness with animals, respect for elders, community cohesion, dream guidance, shamanic leadership, and participation in large ceremonies like potlatches and sun dances. Post-contact art reflects these long-standing values, but is also concerned with the history of conflict within tribes and between Indigenous people and the United States and Canadian governments. Due to this history of suppression and forced assimilation into white culture, influence of Native North American art on modern U.S. and European styles has been minimized. However, recent cultural revitalization of traditions and active contemporary artistic production by self-taught and academically trained artists keep Native American art participation in the global art history alive. There are different strains that range from self-conscious revival of the ancient art, such as the Puebloan pottery we'll talk about in a few minutes, to cutting political commentary on racism and injustice. That will be in our Global Contemporary unit.